Well, I think that the problem is that, part of it is in Olmert and particularly Sharon's case, I think it had to do with corruption investigations that were taking place against them due to crimes that they committed, apparently. And Sharon understands that the law enforcement arms in Israel, and particularly the state prosecution's office, are radical leftists, and if he wanted to try to buy time from them in terms of the investigation of his crimes, as the same thing with Olmert, that the best thing to do would be to veer very sharply to the left. And so I think that what informed Sharon's judgment in this case was fear of criminal prosecution against himself and his sons, fear that was validated by the fact that his son Omri then went to jail after he had a stroke. But I think the other thing with Livni is that you have very strong social pressures in Israel to conform with the radical left that controls the media. And in Livni's case, she was a nobody. She was a junior minister. She was considered a joke, junior also from the perspective of women in the Likud to then Education Minister Limor Livnat. And so when she went to the far left with Ariel Sharon, it was pure political careerism, opportunism, because she went from being a junior minister to being a senior minister. Within 2 years, she became justice minister and foreign minister in Sharon's government, and she became the darling of the media, and her main constituency really has been the Israeli media that has ignored all of her incompetence, all of her hypocrisy, all of her lies, all of her deceits, and all of her nastiness to her own party as well as to the country, because they want to push her forward as a alternative to the Likud. So, she, for her, I don't think that she's under investigation for anything. I think that it's just that she understands which side her bread is buttered on, which is why I think it's so important to change the social dynamic in Israel and lessen the ability of the far left to exert sort of dictatorial powers over what can and cannot be accepted as socially acceptable behavior or ideological opinions.
And if those of you who did not see the column on Tzipi Livni, you should got to read this past Friday's Jerusalem Post, Caroline's column about that topic. Now I want to go to Latma. Latma, it's great in my opinion. I call it satirical Hasbara, and this show is all about Hasbara. Tell those viewers, we did have Shlomo Blast on the program about 6 months ago to talk a little bit about Latma, but in case people are living on a different planet and have not seen the beautiful videos and very important videos you've put together, tell our listeners, what is Latma, what are the goals, and what are you working on now?
Well, Latma, which means smack in slang, actually in Arabic slang that has been transferred into Hebrew slang, is a media criticism website particularly of the Israeli media, but also the media in general, their coverage of events related to Israel. And our sort of revolutionary innovation in the web is that not only do we have every single day updated blog posts about media coverage of events in Israel, we also have a television on internet show that comes out every week called the Tribal Update, which is a satirical news broadcast where we essentially parody the news coverage in Israel in a very funny way. And here, too, I mean, the rationale behind establishing Latma was precisely the rationale that I was talking about in relation to Livni and what moves and motivates right-wing politicians and people to embrace left-wing policies in a crunch. And that is that if you want to change the discourse in Israel, if you want to expand the options for Israeli policymakers as well as for the public, you have to neutralize the intellectual and social terror that the left is able to exert over the Israeli public by making people not feel afraid of them. I mean, the power of humor is that it enables people to no longer feel afraid of things. When you laugh at something, when you laugh at the media in Israel, when you laugh at the organized left in Israel, and you realize that they don't have a monopoly not even close to having a monopoly on intelligence and on social graces and all of the rest of it, then you're no longer afraid to stand up to them. Because I think that it's very clear from polling data that the majority of Israelis is not left-wing. To the contrary, the majority of Israelis also understand that the establishment of a Palestinian state will be a disaster for Israel. But nobody is able to embrace any other option, just particularly in this area, because to do so would be to go against the grain of of what the enlightened people in the media and elsewhere tell us we have to believe. So I think that the first step in empowering the public to stand for what they believe in a serious way is to minimize the ability of the left to engage in intellectual terrorism, essentially, against the public.
And you yourself, you've become an actress. I've seen you yourself in those
I make some
videos.
Cameo appearances there.
Yeah, you like that? Is it fun? You like doing it?
Just to keep my hand
right.
in. But I'm about as talentless in acting as anybody could possibly be.
Oh,
I think
God forbid! Come on now.
My main contribution to Latma Productions, in the sense of my participation in them, is that I highlight how talented all of our professionals are.
Nah, you're selling yourself short. You're doing a great job. I saw you in all of it, in the We Con the World, and the latest one, the Flotilla 2.
Thank you.
That's good stuff. Now, I know your time is short. You're a very, very busy lady. Want to get to the final question. And I ask all my guests this question. And first of all, let's say the website is latma.co.il, correct? Very
That's
important.
Right.
People need to go to the site.
Yes.
Go to YouTube also and check out. If you're living on the moon, or I don't know what, I mean, We Con the World, all these other videos. What was the last one called? That 60 song? Guns. Yeah, very funny stuff. Check that out, latma.co.il.
Yeah, and all of it's also posted. All of the English subtitled versions of the Tribal Update are also posted. I post them regularly on my own website, which is CarolineGlick.com.
CarolineGlick.com, very important. Last question. Overall, Hasbara in Israel. I've had all sorts of people on this show, people who represent the government of the State of Israel. I've had so many names who claim that they know what's best for Israel in terms of Hasbara. I have people like Ron Tarosian, a PR expert, or, I've played Melanie Phillips clips, and they've said Israel's Hasbara initiatives are a disaster. We are not doing our job. And I have others who say they're not so bad and we're making progress. What is Caroline Glick's, what is your assessment on where we stand in terms of getting our message out now? Is it better? Is it worse? How are we doing overall, Israel's Hasbara efforts?
Well, I think that there's some improvement in the last couple of years because the government isn't just sort of playing dead and participating in the Palestinian delegitimization of Israel, which is what Israel had been doing since, on and off we've been doing since 1993. So at least, to a certain degree the government has stopped that now, although they continue to say how much they support a Palestinian state, which doesn't make any sense because that state is inherently a tool for delegitimization of Israel. This land belongs to Arabs, then how can it belong to us? So there's a problem with doing that, and I think that has to be stopped. And we just have to assert our rights. I mean, if you want to make your case, you have to make your case. Nobody's going to make it for you. If you want somebody to buy your product, you have to sell it because otherwise nobody will buy it. And we've begun to try to get the message out that we are the people who are in the right. We are the side that's in the right, and that if you have any moral fiber whatsoever, that you have to stand with Israel and against the Arabs, but we haven't been doing it enough. I mean, that is the only message that makes sense for Israel to be giving, and nothing else matters. The only thing that matters is that this is our land. We are here to stay, and everybody is better off for us being here. And by the way, the people who are fighting against us are terrorists, and they're not willing to accept our right to exist, and they have been waging war against us for over 100 years. And shame on you for supporting them against us. So, I mean, these are really the only messages that have resonance. They're the only messages that can convey reality. And that's the last thing about Hasbara. It's that, Hasbara isn't about selling Eskimos ice cream. It's about selling Eskimos heaters. That is, you have to give people what they truly need, and what people truly need is the truth. And the truth is on our side, and we have to start pushing it. And we can't be whitewashing the Palestinians anymore, and we shouldn't be trying to to apologize for what we do and who we are, because we have nothing to apologize for.
Caroline Glick, senior writer, editor of the Jerusalem Post, also the founder of Latma, latma.co.il. You got to check it out. It's hilarious stuff, and it's not just about the comedy. It's extremely important. Getting that message out, making Israel's case, explaining it in a very, very creative way. I really, really appreciate it, and I'd love to get together soon.
Okay,
Coffee's on me, Caroline.
All right, terrific.
Thanks so much. Keep up the great work. Caroline Glick, thanks so much for joining us. All the best.
Thanks for having me on your show,
Take care.
Josh.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.